Well, hello, Padawans, Princesses Amidala, and power-hungry Sith Lords. Welcome to episode 2 or 5, whichever way we're doing this. Episode 2, The Interview Strikes Back, our time together with very nerdy Star Wars-themed games career advice for you. This is the end of me talking so much because I'm so excited to introduce your Sith Lord, Donna Shannon, and your Jedi Knight, Christina Marie. Hey, y'all.
Hey,
Hello.
welcome to the party.
Woot woot. So this is going to be a very much focused on Q&A experience together. So your conversations in chat will be 100% of what we refer to when we are answering questions, when we're coming up with content to talk about here today. So please feel free to go hard in the paint, as it were, and ask away. If not, we'll certainly have topics that we can touch on. But we'll have chat running along the side, and we'll pull it up on screen as we go. But before we dive into that, Donna, would you like to introduce yourself, and then we'll jump over to Christina?
Sure thing. So my name is Donna Shannon. My company is Personal Touch Career Services. So we help people with all those practical tools for their job search. Of course, we do a lot of resumes, LinkedIn profiles, and cover letters and those things like that. Well, we also get pretty deep into the coaching side of things, including interview coaching and salary negotiations that go along with that. And I'm in Denver, in case you want to know. Mm-hmm.
Cool. I'm Christina Marie Drake. I am a recruiter. I've been a recruiter for about 10 years now, 5 of which have been in the game space. Most recently, I was at Naughty Dog, and I actually interview for fun. That's something I talk a lot about in my one-on-ones. I think interviewing is a blast. I've won awards for interviewing, which I think is pretty weird, but super fun to do. And I definitely help coach people through the interview process in the hopes of getting them a job. And I do a lot of interviewing and interview prep with my hiring managers. So I know what your interviewers are going to ask. And I have no shame in helping you get your value when it comes to negotiation. So kind of partnering here with Donna and kind of giving you some of the back-end recruiter side, especially for the game space.
You know, one of my favorite parts of our last conversation was how quickly you both created incredible value around making sure people understood how to get their value in these career conversations, otherwise known as interviews. You might not even know you're in an interview sometimes when you're having a conversation with a prospective employer, whether you know their perspective or not. And so the way that you represent yourself and the knowledge that you have going into every conversation, in every elevator, in every chat room, chat rooms don't exist anymore. I'm showing my 90s right now. In every AOL chat room that you go into and ask ASL, that's exactly what you should know is your value, because you may very well be asked what that is at any given time. So super, super exciting. Yeah. We have got a couple of comments already rolling through. We've got our friend Desiree Rincon. Hello, Desiree. Welcome to the party. And our friend Justin Scarabarosi. Hello, Justin. We are going full Sith mode today, by the way, folks. So you'll notice that we've got all red. You've got the sort of dark side graphics in the background because we're going towards the Donna Shannon side of the Force on this one, which is very exciting, which is very, very cool. So why don't we, ahead of questions coming through, why don't we just dive in and we can kind of open it up and talk about maybe any topics that you would like to dwell on? If not, I have an idea.
So one thing that I like to teach people when it comes to interviewing is like, I have 3 basic tenets. It's like, number 1, you want to be yourself. And number 2, you want to be honest, but you also need to be aware. And that means both being aware of what you're doing as well as reading the room on what the other interviewer is doing. And when I'm talking about being yourself and being honest, it's also we want to go the best version of ourselves. So it's like we want to tell the truth, not the truth. And if there are hiccups in your background or you're like transitioning to the industry for the first time, it's like have strategies on how you're going to deal with things like gap in your employment, times when you're in another industry, all the rest of these things, because it's going to come up. And you'd be surprised at the amount of people who are like, I sure hope they don't ask about that. So I'm going to focus on what's my greatest weakness and ignore why I was fired at my last job. That's never a good strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about you, Christina? What is something like without fail that you all want want somebody to know?
So I tell people that it's okay to nope out and lean on your nope skills. I see this a lot in my mock interviews. So people will say things like, um, I'll ask them like, okay, imagine a situation where XYZ, and they will try their hardest to figure out every facet of this hypothetical and hyperfix it on that. And I'll say, hey, listen, you can nope out of that. You don't have to play into the hypothetical, right? You can say, rather than saying, okay, well, imagining that I'm in a meeting with my lead and my producer, and this is happening, and who else? Stop spinning your wheels. It's okay to stop talking. It's okay to nope out of a question. And the easiest way to do that is to say something to the effect of, okay, in that type of situation, I would do XYZ. You don't have to actually put yourself in, imagine it, figure out all the
Oh, interesting. Looks like we might have a little bit of a pause moment. What a cliffhanger too, because it's right at such a crucial, like, oh my gosh, the value. There we go. We're back.
Okay. Feel free to note out those questions and to say things like, in those situations, I would do X, because at the end of the day, it's not about the hypothetical. What they're really asking about is, how do you do something? How do you problem solve? How do you work with others? How do you communicate? So by putting yourself into what skills are they looking for, you can note out of questions that you find to be uncomfortable and answer what the underlying current of that question is. It does take a little bit of practice, but it's something you absolutely can do.
Oh my gosh, the number of times that I wish I could have told that to people, whether my teams were talking to them or they're friends of mine or family, even myself, that the ability to control that narrative and to not feel like you're just in this wild river of an interview process, and that you actually have a paddle. In fact, you may have an entire dam that you can use to control the flow of that thing. I hope that people find that empowering as I feel hearing it. Couple quick housekeeping notes as we're starting to see our questions come in. First and foremost, you're going to see some QR codes appear. Right now, there's one up there right next to Christina Marie. That is Donna Shannon's LinkedIn right there, where you can go to find all the amazing services that she provides along with her team. And then now that QR code will be Christina's LinkedIn, where you can go to find Christina and follow her for amazing content about games, jobs, and really just how to be an amazing human being in general, which is kind of awesome to have. And there'll be all kinds of other QR codes up there. I do want to take a quick moment and mention a really exciting collaboration that our very own Christina here is part of in the near future. And that is a nonprofit that I'm part of, which is called Games for Love. We have a big donation drive going on in May right now. Long story short, at Games for Love, we replace pain with play by putting video games in children's hospitals. And right now, Nerd Gear, which is a nerdy shirt Etsy shop that my partner and I actually created, 100% of our proceeds in May are going directly to Games for Love. So if you feel so inclined to go on and buy a shirt like this very nerdy All Might shirt that you see here, if you're an anime fan like myself, please come on in, and all those proceeds go to Games for Love. And those QR codes will flash here and there as well. Thank you for indulging my quick pumping there. So here we have a question from LinkedIn user. Once in a while, we will see anonymous names on here, just so you know. So if you'd like to have your name said out loud, please go ahead and say your name when we're talking about your comment. But how do internship interviews differ from job interviews? Is there anything you do or don't do for one, but not the other? What an amazing question. Oh my gosh.
I'm going to talk about the mistake a lot of people make with internship interviews, and that is that they don't treat them seriously. It is a job interview, and even if it's an unpaid internship and it's only lasting for 3 months, you are being judged based on your professionalism going into that interview itself. Now, of course, the samples you're going to be bringing to the table about your work ethic or projects that you've done or what you've been learning in class is going to relate back into your educational experiences. But also remember your life experiences that you're bringing to the table, because that can add value even if you don't have a whole ton of work experience.
And I would say too, I think that the biggest difference is I think there's a little bit more grace in internship interviews. We know, right, that this may be the first time you've ever interviewed for a job. We know that it's probably the first time you're interviewing for a professional job. So there is a little bit of grace there. We do expect, if you maybe are more nervous, I think that that's all things that we're prepared for. The things we don't expect, or the things that we would suggest against, is you do have professional work that you can showcase. It might be student work, right? But you, even as a student, are a game dev professional. You just happen to be a level 1, right? And it's different than someone who comes in with 10 years experience and is level 10. So I just say, like, you do have ownership, you do belong in this space, and you can own that feeling of belonging in this space. But just know, if you do mess up, we do have, I think, a little bit more grace in that internship aspect. But other than that, the questions are typically pretty similar. How they're framed might be different, but all in all, I don't think there's a ton of major differences.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, it's okay to say that you're nervous. Like, you don't want to say it a million times in the interview itself, but it's like, if you're early in the interview process, you're stumbling over your answers, or you're just like having a hard time thinking of things, it's okay to take that break and go, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm kind of nervous because this interview means so much to me. And then guess what? You're talking to another human being. They're not going to roast you for that. They're going to be able to go, oh, that makes perfect sense. Let's just, relax. We're going to have a conversation. And it'll usually put you at ease, unless they're like a total jerk. And then, because sometimes employers do the high pressure route because they want to see you sweat. I know a guy who used to do that. But that's another thing to take note about how that company is being operated.
Absolutely. And I think even this happened in a one-on-one that I did recently. Someone said to me, she said, English isn't my first language. So I have a really hard time sometimes when they ask me big jargon questions, or sometimes I feel like my answers aren't articulate enough. And I feel like sometimes people get confused by that. And I told her, just tell me that in the beginning. Just say, hey, my English isn't my first language. So please bear with me as I kind of find the right vocabulary. And if you need me to clarify, let me know. So if there is something that you have that is personal to you, an issue like language barrier, nervousness, right? I've had people tell me, I'm so sorry, I'm a little bit anxious. Can I have a second? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I get it, because you are human and it is natural. So feel free to frame that in the beginning and really just kind of set the tone, I think, for your interview. That goes back to ownership, right? Like, take ownership of your interview and be okay with taking ownership of your interview.
Oh man, one, and this might not work for everybody, but one sort of tactical version of that one, Christina, that I've used myself in my own career, which may have only worked for me, but if anybody else wanted to consider this, I kind of feel like in any given interview, you have like one extra life, right? You've got this extra life that you can use where at some point you might stumble or lose your train of thought. That's like the nightmare scenario, right? You're halfway through an example and you're like, oh boy, I know there was a question here. And now I'm off here talking about whatever. Probably assign your interview answers too long, actually. But when that happens, I kind of think of it as like one extra life, which actually can be really humanizing. And actually, especially if, like myself, I have a big opportunity with A, talking too much, and B, trying to sound too fancy with big verbiage words, like verbiage that aren't necessary, right? And so sometimes pausing and saying, like, you know what? I just want to slow down a little bit and take a breath because I know that's an area of opportunity for me. That can humanize you in ways that really goes far beyond what you might have done. Wouldn't do it with every question, to Christina's point. That might not be super great, but maybe that one extra life.
Yeah. And so Julie has a great question here about how to frame layoffs in the interview. So it's one of those things that's, again, be yourself and be honest. You might get a follow-up question, especially if it's the HR person saying, so how many other people were laid off? The reason why they're asking a question like that is because sometimes in the past, people have said, I was laid off, to hide that they were fired. So if they were the only person laid off on a team of 300, that's kind of like cast the shadow on that. But we understand what's been going on in the market. It's nothing to be embarrassed about or feel anxious about that your company had to make another choice and had to do a reduction in force or reduce staff. Now, how you talk about that is you phrase and focus on the achievements that you did have in the time that you were there. And it's honestly more of a problem on the resume because now you have to get over short-term jobs on the resume to get to the interview itself. And that's kind of like a different matter.
Yeah. And I think something that I use a lot is I literally do, like, I bury the lead all the time. So when I'm interviewing, even now, I'll say something effective like, yeah, when I was at Naughty Dog prior to my layoff, I did blah, 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 blah. Right. And doing that, I think kind of just sets stuff like, oh, now we know why she left her company because she was laid off. But while she was there, she did X. I will tell you, I was in an interview years ago with a major AAA studio, and they did call me out for having multiple short jobs on my resume. They said, hey, it looks, because at the very end of my interview, and we could talk about this, I asked them, is there anything that, is of concern or anything that I should address before we end our time today? And they said, yeah, it looks like you job hop a lot. And that's something that we really prioritize longevity. Can you explain that? And I said, well, it's actually really funny. My husband also works in games. And if you laid our resumes side by side, you would see that every time I changed careers or every time I got a new job, it lined and correlated directly with him being laid off from a studio. And they were like, yeah, that makes sense as a game dev spouse. Like all of them were like, that tracks. And I said, once I could have a fully remote job, it didn't matter. And you saw that's where it stabilized. And I had the same job for 6 years. But prior to that, it was literally like every 18 months with a mobile studio. I'm like, that's how it went. And they were like, yeah, that makes sense. So again, feeling free to how you frame that. I could have been like, oh, well, it's kind of a long story. And like, it's kind of weird because like sometimes my husband gets in. No, it doesn't have to be that. Just again, that ownership piece, right? And like, it's actually funny. If you laid desks next to each other, you would see my husband got laid off. I needed to find a new job. And it tied into where we relocated to. And they're like, that tracks, right? So being mindful of, again, that ownership piece and not being afraid to admit it. These are crazy times. We know, like Donna said, how the industry is, especially in the game space. Like the game space and tech has been hit incredibly hard. We recognize that. We know that. And you saying, again, I was one, you probably saw the news. I was one of the 900 Sony employees laid off. Like, yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I do want to point out, Christina dropped a Jedi move in there that you might have missed. And it's definitely a master's level move where she asked the interviewer, do you have any questions about me or my experience? That is a terrifying question to ask the employers, but it's absolutely critical because they're going to have objections in their minds about wanting to hire you. And if you never ask that question, you never find out what that is, and you can never address it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's huge.
I think at the end of every interview that I've ever had, they ask you, right? Hey, do you have any questions for us? And most people say things like, can you tell me about the manager I'll be working with? Some surface level stuff about the day-to-day, maybe some benefits questions. That trick is a question I always open with because I know that our time is limited. I can find out benefits from a recruiter. I can find out benefits from the website, right? I could see their presence on social media to get a feel of their company culture. I could talk to their employees or people I know in my network. What I can't ask them is, like Donna's saying, how do I get ahead in this interview and make sure that all of your potential biases, any potential perceptions of me have been alleviated? And for me, like Donna said, I just asked them, okay, based on today's conversation or on my resume, is there anything that I can clarify or anything that you have questions about with me or my experiences is the gateway to getting ahead and making sure that you absolve any of those issues up front.
Great. So I think we have another question here in the stream. Oh, what do you think about candidates getting or having interview questions in advance?
Great question, Donna. Real quick, though, want to dwell on a point that Christina made there, which is, boy, sometimes great candidates have an interesting wrinkle in their story. And I hope that there's hiring managers and recruiters in this call, just as there are candidates. Because when you're working with that hiring manager, or you are that hiring manager, you put yourself at an incredible disadvantage when you say something like, I just don't want somebody who job hops. Because you might have missed out on Christina, right? Like, so, and if you're that recruiter and you're counseling that hiring manager as a consultant, as most recruiters really are these days, you can really create a major difference for your brand by helping to change that mindset around what a job hopper is and what somebody who's just part of an industry that is inherently subject to some pretty title shifts really looks like. Okay, Donna, you were pointing out a really great question. And who is that from?
It was from Wendy.
It's so funny. We've had multiple Wendy's. Is this Wendy Prantner? Is this guy right here perhaps the question?
Yes, that's it. Okay, so getting or having interview questions in advance. Oh, so you want the cheat sheet. That's what that is. Well, duh, that's gold, of course, but are you always going to be having that? Not necessarily. And it's also possible to over prepare in the wrong direction. I know, like Glassdoor, you can go and see interview questions that have been asked in the past, but it's like having that, oh, what's my greatest weakness? They never asked me what my greatest weakness is. They're the point where they're asking me questions. Well, I want you to know what my weaknesses are. So, because I over prepared for that so much. So it's one of the downfalls with that. But Christina, you work a lot with that, knowing what the questions are going to be.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of things that with this, I think Donna's right. I don't know if there's ever been an opportunity where we've given candidates questions in advance. I do know that there are a lot of common questions that we do ask that you could prepare for in general, right? We talk a lot about strengths and weaknesses. We talk a lot about tell me about yourself. We talk a lot about give me a situation when, to find some of that conflict resolution or communication styles. Those are all pretty common and you can prepare for those in general, but they won't always be a one-to-one. I do with my candidates, especially candidates that I love and I want to champion. I have been known to tell them, okay, my team really cares about X. Like my team may really care about diversity, equity, and inclusion and how you do that in your day-to-day. So that may be something you want to be prepared for in your interview. As a recruiter, if I'm championing you, I want to set you up for success. Like I've already believed in you. We've met multiple times. We've established a relationship. I want you to succeed. I may not tell you the exact question, even though I know what the pool of questions are that my team is pulling from, because I don't want to be biased or give you any like advantage that's going to basically like get me in trouble. But I can tell you what to prepare for, right? I can tell you prepare to be prepare to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. Prepare to talk a lot about conflict resolution. I know that we're working on an internal project that's going to require overhauling some systems. So anything that you have that could reflect pipelining is going to be beneficial in your conversations. Those are all phrases that your recruiter will use, especially if they really believe in you and they want you to move forward. So listen for those kind of keys, which will help you kind of gauge where you're at and if your recruiter is on your team or leaning towards maybe letting you go and finding a different role for you in the future.
Now, one thing I do train people to do is, behavioral questions where you have to come up like with a story or a situation. The best way to know what situations you're going to address is go through the job description itself. And for every single one of the bullet points, write down a story that relates to that specific duty, requirement, or qualification. Because then it's going to be focused on that job and that company, not just some rando stuff that you read online.
And in that prep too, make sure you're using Carl and STAR. Those two methods of answering questions. STAR is pretty popular, right? Your situation, the task, the actions, the results. Carl, if you haven't been familiar or met Carl, I did a post on this a while back. It's the circumstance, the actions, the results, and what you learned. If you're going for an internship opportunity, Carl will be your best friend. If you're going into pivoting into a new team, Carl will also be very beneficial. Telling me what you learned shows you have room for growth, and shows that you will take feedback from my managers and my leads.
Uncle Carl.
Carl. I always think of Walking Dead when I say it. I always just
Carl.
Yeah, I always every time. I put a little picture up of Rick, on the side of my screen.
Emotional damage. Matt Barney volunteers a really excellent interview question to be ready for, which is when Darth Vader walks into the room, what do you say? How about a moment of a break in between the big heavy stuff? What would you guys say if you were asked this question in an interview?
Of course, me and my oriented mind was all like, oh, that's just like the CEO walking into the room. But you're like legit want to know how fangirly I would get with Darth Vader walking in the room? Come on.
Spoken as a true Sith. As a true Sith.
Yeah. I definitely am gonna be like, who makes your cape? I'm gonna be like, or like something I can't even say on this call. I would make some reference to force choking for sure.
Oh,
absolutely.
There it is. We can build out from here. Yeah. I'd say sweet cosplay, and then I would probably immediately get force choked.
Right. Or just say, well, here's another great thing you'd say to Darth Vader. I love everything that you've done for DE&I, especially with people with disabilities. It gives me so much hope with my own asthma. just to know that you can rise so high in this organization and that your boss made so many accommodations for your disabilities.
I love that. That's the real MVP answer right there. That's the real
There it
answer.
is. That is the winner. That is
That's
the winner.
amazing. That's
You know,
why
we
Donna's
just
the professional in the room. That's why she is the GOAT right now. That's why.
true go. That's how you earn the polo shirt, right there.
Yeah.
That's how you get the polo.
I'd be like,
You
where's
know,
the radar technician?
Matt Bernie Sanders also calls out May the 4th be with you, which actually gives us a really great moment to call out an event hosted by our friends. That's going to be the only Marie Ableza and Jaleesa Eliason. They're hosting their Game Talk Unlocked event tomorrow. If you're in the greater LA area, come on by because it is on, of course, May the 4th. And it's going to be a pretty amazing event, 5 to 9 p.m. in LA. Please go ahead and scan that QR code and hang out with those amazing humans and a bunch of others all about gaming careers.
It's going to be super awesome. I will not be there. I'm so sad. But the rest of you will have a blast. I will be hosting my own May the 4th party because for those of you that don't know, I do have a pure May the 4th baby. So she will be a year. And so she has her 1 year birthday party on May the 4th.
Aw.
Oh, it's Star Trek themed, right?
One with the Force. One with the Force is her.
Oh, nice. Is she going to dress up as Jean-Luc Picard or? Okay, next question. It looks like Kit calls out. I was going to bring up the Force choking as well.
We must read the same books, Kit. We must read the same books.
Yeah, we're going in the right spot. We're going in the right direction. Okay, so we did have a couple of other really great questions that are very tactical. And one of them was actually about somebody coming from a layoff in a very small organization. Let's see if we can find it. Here we go. Steve Node asks, I was let go from a small company of only 6 people. How do you handle that? Great question.
So obviously, don't feel bad about the layoff. I mean, those are things outside of your control. But whenever we're talking about any kind of small team, startup organizations like that, there's so much you're bringing to the table because you had to wear so many hats just inherently in those kind of situations. So that's one of those things I definitely emphasize more about how you could contribute to the team, even though ultimately the company itself was not successful. That's my thought.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I was let go. I was laid off from a small company in a biodiesel company. I mean, there was only like 30 of us. I mean, it's not the same of 6, right? But there's 30, which is still relatively small. And they laid off 10 of us. And the way that I framed it was just in terms of percentage. So I just said I was part of a layoff that included a third of our company. I didn't really need to justify the size, right? Even 1 in 10 is 10%. You know what I mean? So framing it that way might help if that's something that you wanted to be beneficial or might find beneficial in your answers.
Yep, that's definitely a Jedi mind trick. Fun with numbers. Yeah.
That also comes up when we talk about compensation. So Donna, the way that I do kind of assessing value or when students ask me, how do I assess my value? I tell them like, look at the range and assign it percentages. Sometimes students have a hard time, or even sometimes professionals have a hard time saying, especially now with ranges being public in California, it makes it easier for me as a recruiter because I know that if you're not in my range, you're probably not applying. So that's helpful. Or if you're not close to the range at least, right? So that's been beneficial. But that's how I do it. I look at the range and I say, okay, it's I think that there is, it's whatever, 1 to 110, let's say. I'm like, okay, so each of those, right, breaks down to about 22. So then I just say, okay, I'm probably in the middle range of that, 50%. I think I have 50% of the job qualifications. I'm probably a solid middle candidate. I could easily ask for 105 in that 1 to 110 range. That's perfect 50%. Donna, what do you suggest people do, or how should they find value when they're going into some of those salary conversations?
So if number one, you have to understand the laws of where you're at. I know, okay, I used to do HR, talk about ultimate dark side, right? I was an HR person, and part of that is understanding what are the laws around where you're at. There's big movements going on in the United States right now. It's coming through in multiple states where they cannot ask you your previous salary. But do all the managers know that? No. Do the managers always care? No. So I like to talk in terms of like total compensation, because your total compensation includes your benefits packages, your 401k matches, things like that. And especially if you were underpaid in your last job, and they won't let go of the bone about how much were you making before, then citing things along the lines of total compensation. But actually, the thing that's most important is the salary you're seeking now, not what you were getting paid before. And I like to talk in terms of range until we get the actual salary offer on the table. And of course, there's flipping the whole thing back on the person, right? So, Christina, if I ask you, what kind of salary do you want to make in this job?
I would say I'm looking for a salary that's comparable, that meets or exceeds my last position. I'm looking for something in the range of what you have posted.
Okay, I would actually do it differently.
Okay, tell me.
I'm gonna flip that answer back on the interviewer.
Okay.
To the point, saying things along the lines of, you know, we're still talking about all the responsibilities and scope of this position. I would love to hear from you what your salary range is for this position. And then you shut up and you don't say a thing. And there's like this weird, awkward silence where everybody just kind of stares at each other, because this is that trick in negotiations where whoever says the number first loses. Because even if it's posted online, I want to hear it from the person's mouth what they're looking to hire. Because there's so many companies who are playing the games of like, this job pays between $50,000 to $150,000. No, it doesn't. You're just doing that to play games with your compliance. I want to hear you say, as my boss, I'm looking to hire within a $70,000 to $80,000 range. And if I at the time was gunning for something that's 100,000, then I can go, you know what, that's a little bit lower than what I'm looking for. But if I'm a brand new college graduate and I was thinking I was going to get 50, and they're telling me they're starting at 70, I would have cost myself $20,000 by throwing numbers too fast. Always get them to say those numbers first.
Having signed off on probably 5,000 offers in my day, I will say that that is arguably the most financially valuable piece of information anyone on this call is going to hear in the next 7 calendar days. Like at least, if not well beyond that, because you look at how pay leapfrogging works, right? Like you typically go up by between 10 to 20% with each time you leave a job. And you know, there's a lot of folks who aren't going to love the fact that someone's bringing this up right now, but I will. And that is the fact that when you leave jobs, you're typically going to see a 10 to 20% raise. When you stay, you're going to see typically a cost of living, or slightly better if you're a high performer, maybe 5 to 7.5%, right? And so those are two different numbers. And I'll leave it to everybody here to calculate what that difference is. When you make those jumps, if each time you do that, it's less, think about how that compounds over the course of and we're all probably going to work, probably 50 to 100 years, since we're all going to live to be 150 with medical science advancing. That could cost you literally millions of dollars. That one mistake, what Donna just said, doing that one thing differently right now today could cost you millions of dollars over the course of your life. So just no pressure, anybody.
Right.
Okay, great question coming through here from our friend Dave Goldschmidt, a media recruiter I know, told me cover letters are old-timey and just give us too much opportunity to incite criticisms that can pre-reject us. Thoughts? Side note, when you say old-timey, I picture somebody being like, hey, son, let me tell you about my cover letter now. But over to you guys.
I can tell you from a recruiter side, I've definitely used cover letters a ton. I review hundreds and hundreds of applications for a job. I think at Naughty Dog, I think I reviewed 58,000 applications in a single year. Like I review a lot of applications. When I have two candidates who are generally equally matched on paper, the cover letter for me is that tiebreaker. That's the opportunity for you to showcase something unique, something personal, something that really is going to set you apart from just a paper application. I've got two applicants. Both of them have 5 years of experience. Both of them have phenomenal portfolios or a phenomenal reel. How do I differentiate which one of those is going to go to my hiring manager? Which one am I going to put my time and money into, my time and treasure right into? For me, it's going to be the person with the cover letter that is the most compelling. And that cover letter for me does serve as a tiebreaker. So if I have to make a hard decision, I pass the one to the cover letter, or the cover letter that I think resonates the most with our job and our philosophy as a studio, over to my hiring manager. So in that sense, I would say no. Are they old timey? sure, they are something that we've been doing for a very, very, very long time. But do I think they're important? Absolutely. It shows that you cared enough to put in a cover letter. While I may not read every single one, I will fully admit I do not read every single one. I think that when it gets to my hiring managers, they do, right? Because I've only passed them out of the 1,000 applications I've reviewed, I've passed them 5, right? Maybe 8. Because that's all they have time to review. So of those 8, they're going to pick their top 5 to interview. And your cover letters for them, it's much easier to read 8 cover letters than 1,000. So for me, I would say do it.
Well, also, stupid cover letters are definitely old timing.
Yes.
Those suck. You don't want to write something that sucks. So if your cover letter sounds like this, I am interested in the XYZ job I saw posted on LinkedIn. As you will see on my resume, I have 5 years of experience in game development, especially in creating, characters that resonate with people and interesting worlds. I am looking for my next opportunity for advancement. That sucks. Good God, you're telling me you create worlds and you just created the most driest, dustiest world. You made Tatooine, but without huts or anything interesting going on it.
All womp rats.
Yeah. Yeah. So if your cover letter is talking about what you can do for them, how well you understand their company, their properties, how well you fit in there, because your cover letter is not about you, it's about them and their needs. Those are going to be the ones that matter.
Yep.
But we're talking about interviews today.
That's true. That's true. That's true. Someone did have a salary question, Donna, that went with, what do you do when somebody, when an application requires you to put in a number? I'll tell you the thing that I do that's probably bad, but Donna, I'll let you answer first and give the.
I want to hear yours first. Yeah.
Oh, I put all zeros.
Yeah. I'd $1. Yeah.
Yeah. I put all zeros.
Yeah. Because they know it's not going to be a real number.
I'm like, yeah, I put all zeros.
And that could be interpreted as a violation of California SB 1162 as well. And companies, if you are a company that's doing that, if I was consulting with you right now, I would strongly advise you to not do that.
We do at Naughty Dog ask on some applications for your desired range. We do ask that. And we have had people come back and say to be determined, or we'll discuss later in the process. Totally fine. We have some people who do put a salary range. They'll literally just copy and paste it from the website. That's fine too. I will tell you, like, as much as people say, like, don't give a number first, as a recruiter, I love when people do give me a number. It means that if it's low, I can tell you it's low off the bat. I had someone who interviewed at Naughty Dog with me, and it was his first job. He was coming in as a coordinator, and he was going to play hardball with me. And he said, "Hey, I saw this job. I really want $20 an hour." And I was like, "Okay, well, I know." And this was before it was posted publicly, right? This was before the laws changed. And in my head, I said, "Well, I know we start this role at 25 an hour." And so I said, "Listen, I think based on your experience, we probably could ask for 26 or 27 and get away with it. Let me go talk to leadership about that for you." And they were floored. They were like, "I only made 17 at my last job. 27 is like mind blowing." They were like, that's going to change my whole life. And they were like crying. As a recruiter, I can't make those decisions for you. I can't help, champion that on the back end if I don't know. And so depending on the studio you work with, that's kind of a caveat, right? Depending on the studio you work with, it may be beneficial to buddy up to your recruiter and let them know what you're looking for. Because we are ultimately, especially if we're later in the process, it's like down to 2 or 3 people. It's our job really to help make everyone happy, the hiring managers and you. And if you're coming in low, my hiring managers aren't going to be happy, right? Because you're not going to be happy. So really, really navigating that. So just something that I'm going to say, like, depending on your recruiter or your relationship, how it's been going, it always is helpful if you just give me a number so I can tell you if it's high or low or what I think. It also tempers expectations. When you come and you say, "Hey, I see the range is 100 to 110. I'm looking for 175. I'm like, there's absolutely no wiggle room to go up to 175. Like, there just isn't. So let's figure this out before I move you on to a hiring manager and waste everyone's time. So last piece on that. I saw a couple of.
We got a lot of questions about cover letters. I think y'all have
part 3
force here and found either defined episode 3 or defined the next 20 minutes or so. do we want to talk about cover letters, or is that maybe even its own entirely separate conversation?
Yeah, we've had so many interesting questions coming in the chat. There's no way that we can get to them all. I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one of the beautiful things too, that to call that out, why I love LinkedIn Live so much is this event, the comment thread, anything anybody says here lives in the comments. So we can actually go in, everybody here can go in and continue the conversation there. And a recent addition that not everybody knows about, there's a tab here on this event that says networking. And you can actually go in there and see everyone else that was part of this conversation. And you can go and connect with them, send connection requests. Please include notes, of course, so they know that you're not just a rando. And that's super helpful. With that said, we do have a couple of questions that are more tactical, but please go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I saw one from someone, I think it was Darren, who asked about like post-interview letters or what to do post. Yeah. Not that one, but he asked about,
here we go.
Yeah, post-interview. Yeah. Post-interview letters. So you've had your interview, right? And we kind of talked through, right? You've had your interview, you've tackled some of those difficult questions. It's the end of the interview, you send a post-interview letter. My mama always taught me to always send a thank you note for everything. John, I've sent thank you texts too for little things, right? Like I send thank you notes for everything. Back in the day when you had to like go to an office and apply and sit in the lobby and wait, I would write notes to everybody in the process. So I would write a thank you note to the front desk girl. I wrote a thank you note to every single interviewer. So I'm a big fan of sending post-interview thank you notes. It also is an opportunity for you to kind of recap or rehash any mistakes you did make, right? So you can say, hey, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. I loved talking with you about interview tips and tricks today. I did notice that a couple of points I had to mute my mic because I was sick and I was coughing. Apologize for that. Sorry. But overall, I had a great time and I really hope to hear from you with next steps, right?
Yeah. So one thing I would do differently though is I never admit a mistake.
Mm.
Total Sith move. We don't make mistakes. Okay. The only thing you can do on that thank you letter is re-emphasize a point of strength.
I love that.
Because if you actually say, oh, I'm sorry that I totally blew this question. Here's what I actually meant. Instead of them going, wow, Christina was an awesome candidate, they're going to go, wow, Christina really did blow that one. And also the questions that you think you just totally destroyed and screwed up may not be seen that way by the person who was interviewing you.
Interesting.
But if you're calling it out, I mean, I do stand-up comedy on the side and I screw up my jokes all the time, but you guys don't see me enough to know I screwed up that joke and you still laugh. So I'm not going to stand up here and go, well, that joke died, you know?
Sure.
That's going to be a bad set all the way around. But absolutely do send your thank you letters because only 10% of applicants actually send thank you letters. Whether that's a note on LinkedIn, an email, a physical card, whatever, and you want to be a person who stands out, make sure you send thank you notes, and to the recruiters too, not just to the hiring managers.
As a recruiter who gets thank you notes, I can tell you, like, I remember the people that send them to me. I actually have a little folder in my Outlook, and it's called Warm Fuzzies. And I send all of my like sentimental messages there, and then I save them for bad days. And it also helps me remember you, right? So even if you don't get this job, you're someone that made me feel a warm fuzzy. You're someone that reminded me why I do my job and why I enjoy it. Your gratitude goes a long way. And I remember that. And I know now, like in the future, I just met with someone this week who got rejected from a job at Naughty Dog. She's an artist. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm having a fangirl moment because I loved you so much in the interview process. And she was like, oh my gosh, I thought you were so cool. And I was like, I honestly am like obsessed with you. And she was like, I feel like I'm meeting a celebrity. I was like, me too, right? But we had that connection. And every time there's a particular open role, even at another studio, I'm like, hey, have you looked at so-and-so? Like, have you looked at so-and-so? Have you looked at so-and-so? So even if I don't have a role for you at my company, there are so many behind the scenes conversations happening with recruiters because we're all friends, especially in this industry. Like there's so many studios and so few of us. That we all share candidates all the time. So we might be sharing you and championing you to a totally different studio that you mentioned in your interview to me. Like, oh, I love Naughty Dog games. I also love Insomniac games. And even if you didn't get your job here, I might be like, hey, Insomniac, I know so-and-so and they're looking and. So you don't ever know what the lasting impact of your thank you note could be.
Christina, I picture you saying, "Did we just become best friends?" Yup.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yup.
I told
You know,
her, I said, listen, I remember this piece in your portfolio. And she was like, oh my gosh, that was like a year and a half ago. I was like, dude, I'm telling you, you were my number one and you didn't get it. And I was good.
Boy, being that memorable and that indelible. Honestly, this question about cover letters or about thank you notes, that is, and cover letters, but certainly thank you notes, has come up more in my one-to-ones and mentoring calls than ever before lately. And I think I've been wondering about this actually, and it's come up now a couple times in our questions here. I think it might be a more of a like a move towards authenticity, right? Like we're seeking more of a connection and less of a transactional apply, playing a numbers game, right? Almost like an RNG, opening a loot box of your career, and like 1 in 1,000 is a golden shiny actual job, and more of an actual like I want to create a connection and use that as a proxy test to see if I want to be part of this. I would give you 3 reasons why you absolutely should write thank you notes. 1, go into the conversations knowing that you're going to, and remember facts about the conversations that mean that you were paying attention. You talked to Christina. She mentioned that she has a child that was born on the 4th. That's tomorrow. You send that note and say, I hope that you have an amazing May the 4th with your kiddo, right? Like that means that you are a human being there and you were really paying attention, and you are somebody that they would want to work with. And that's the second piece. Everybody that's advocating and communicating with one another about what their conversations with you have been like, especially in a longer process or a bigger full loop process, they're going to be talking about not just whether you met those qualifications, but how they see you connecting with that team and whether they would want to work with you. I would want to work with somebody that would send a note like that, right? And lastly, honestly, you'll have more fun. Like having an attitude of gratitude in an admittedly challenging process can be a major forcing factor for you in a positive direction. It can really help you to enjoy the process more and to not get so burned out, because it can be a slog. You know, it can be a real run through the Death Star trench sometimes. We got okay, cool. We got people calling out hashtag stepbrothers. So that is fantastic. We do have what if the people are unfindable and don't have an email or phone number to get back to or send a thank you note to?
You go to your recruiter. Yep. Yeah. You can totally pass the note on to them, ask them to forward it for you. That's not only your gatekeeper, that's your channel into the company. Yep.
That's beautiful.
So Alexandre had a great question too, but we'll do this one first because it's a controversial one. That's going to be awesome. So,
you know, we to your point though, we probably want to save this one maybe even for our last one, because this is not a quick one, but I think Alexander's we might be able to snipe better.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
So I know this question specifically about like writing your passion in a cover letter on your, in your resume or whatever the case may be. It's like, yes, that's important, but it's also important how you talk about it in the interview process itself. Companies want to know that you understand what their products are, understand their brand, understand who they are and what they do, but also not be like so fangirly that you're not treating it as a professional interview. So I used to do radio as well, and my big goal was the heavy metal station in town that I wanted to be their morning show producer. And it was the 90s, all right? So everything was inappropriate, and they were shock jocks. So I also weighed like 60 pounds less. So I didn't wear sweater bumpers, but I did put on a leather miniskirt that I wear more.
Hold on. Did I miss this chapter of the 90s? Wait. Hold on.
What is a sweater bumper?
Dude, this is what the cool guys were doing in the 90s instead of playing video games, okay?
That's a good point. Yeah, we were playing Secret of Mana while people were bumping sweaters. I don't know. What?
No, we did have a gal show up with sweater bumpers. It's like,
I don't know what that is.
Nobody knows. Yeah, you children don't know what that is.
I think I know what it is. I don't know.
I'm going to Google it right now.
I'm not Googling it.
No, don't Google it right now.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just that it makes women look like they're cold all the time. Let me just say that, okay? So no, I didn't wear that, but I did wear the leather miniskirt and I dressed in the colors of the station and talked about I knew all the music, all the rest of that, but also I had the creds to back me up because I had a degree in music business management and audio engineering. I had been working at the radio station in a different capacity for like 4 years before that, 3 or 4 years before that. So, yes, I came in a little bit hard on the branding, but also I didn't forget the professionalism that has to come with that.
Absolutely. And we see that too. I mean, I've seen in the game space people who like, they just go on and on and on about how obsessed they are with our IP and they're just obsessed with the IP and obsessed with the IP. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But there are other IPs out there. You probably won't stay here for your entire life, right?
Mhm.
So what about the IP? Do you love cinematics, right? Is that something you're in love with the narrative? You're in love with this inclusive storytelling, right? Talk to me about what you love about the IP, not just about the IP and like how you want us to make a new Jack and Daxter game, right? Really, really talk about the things that drive your passion, not just about like being clout chasing what we've created already. Like talk about how you're going to help create the next generation of inspired fans.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what's in it for you, right? Like why I love it, and connect that with what to Christina just said, like how your awareness of the lore, right, of your favorite game franchise, how that would empower you to create the next chapter, not like you. I like that clout chasing. That's pretty awesome. Okay, let's we got at most 8 minutes to talk through this controversial question, because this is a lot of sort of future tripping. This is going to be kind of, I think, very fun. So let's open it up. Andre asks, controversial question: if companies nowadays are not in the habit of hiring entry-level game devs, when all the seniors retire, what will the market be like in your opinion? Hashtag difficult question.
You want to take it first, Christina?
I'm like unpredictable. So there's a couple of things with this. One, we are seeing retire rates happen significantly later, right? So for the first time ever, we're having 4, sometimes 5 generations in the same workplace. My dad is working and he is now working with someone who's 17. That in the past has not been the commonplace in the industries across the board. So I don't know. I don't even know when all the seniors will retire. I think that this habit you're talking about of not hiring entry-level game developers is maybe misunderstood because of the current market we're in. Naughty Dog, I definitely hired contract roles. I definitely hired associate roles. I hired people right out of college prior to this last round of layoffs. So I think there's kind of twofold, right? One, this habit of not hiring entry level. I think that's a very short-term thing. I think right now the market is flooded with laid off talent that is of a higher caliber and is making it more difficult for entry-level talent and break-in talent. That I think is accurate. I don't think that's going to last for forever, right? I also don't think that seniors are going to be retiring in a way that you think anytime soon. One, people love this industry. They want to be here. They want to work in it. So this idea of like retiring with a cushy pension at 65, it's not happening, right? You're seeing people like that starting new studios and bringing in new talent. So it's kind of a unique situation. And I can't tell you what the market will be like when that happens because I don't know how long it will be and how many changes in what is essentially a brand new industry. Like by comparison to TV, film, video games is relatively new, right? So even this round of layoffs is pretty unprecedented because our industry is it's literally still in its infancy. So I can't tell you what the market will be like because I think we're too young. Number one, as an industry, we're too young to know what that looks like. Two, I think that you're tying this current sliver of industry trend of not being able, quote unquote, to hire entry level, which again is not 100% accurate. It's a little black and white. And then three, this idea of seniors retiring, which isn't happening at the same rate and is a little bit unprecedented for our industry in general. So I have a no answer.
Yeah. Well, when you look at Gen Xers like me, who know about sweater bumpers and all other kind of crazy things, but we are not getting our Social Security until like age 67. And in some cases, it's up to age 72. So, yeah, we're not really leaving all that quickly. What's a lot better is to look for opportunities for mentorship with these senior developers. And if your company is not offering it, your company doesn't have a mentorship program, find ways to get in touch with these people on your own. And yes, I understand that's going to be challenging, but we recommend this as a strategy for breaking into a real organization as well, where you find the people on LinkedIn who are already working on there and try to get in like a 15-minute informational interview from them just to find out about their career, their work. And it's all about them. It's not about you. It's about them. And those are the relationships that can help open doors.
I think there's a really great resource if you haven't been a part of it. Yeah, John, do you want to take it? You've already got it.
Sure. One of my favorite things to talk about, mentoring, so important. Not only are you getting impossibly valuable information, but you're putting somebody in your corner that's going to be there when you need it most, right? When not just when you're getting the job, but when you're growing in your job. And those are not transactional relationships. Those can be in my experience, they're some of the most meaningful relationships I've ever discovered through a professional channel. Amir Satvat, if you don't know him, you should. And if you follow that QR code right there, you'll go directly to amirsatvat.com, where you will find an almost impossibly amazing set of free resources that a whole army of volunteers with Amir, our fearless leader at the head, spending an incredible, probably cumulatively thousands of hours creating content just for you, whether it's mentoring resources, it is career prep resources, it is job planning, interview prep, resumes, even job listings, indie, everything. Like, it's all there. You just go. That's all I should say. Just like follow that link and go and check it out. It's amazing.
And something else Amir offers too, John, and tying it back to today, is mock interviews. So if you're someone who isn't getting interviews, he has an entire Excel document of people, including myself, my husband, other people in this industry, who have volunteered time to just do mock interviews. So you can schedule time, sit down, do mock interviews, figure out what some of those pitfalls are, right? Are you stumbling over your words? Are you not concise? Are you coming up with situations that aren't relevant? What does that look like? And how can you be a better interviewer?
Christina, you mentioned that you have gotten awards for interviewing. I wonder if we should do like the interview Olympics and like take a bunch of people like us, and we can bring our best sweater bumper questions. And did I say it right? No, I probably not. But we could come and we could all like do our best, and people could maybe even like watch and learn from that. Going back though to that whole like what's the industry going to look like, I just want to put one thing out there that I hope is a little bit of a like episode 4, A New Hope in the future for everybody. Okay, so to Donna's point, people are not retiring as quickly now. And let's be honest, that's because of some inflationary concerns that, look, a $5 footlong at Subway is like $12.83. Mm-hmm. That ain't right. Like something's wrong there, right? And so there are financial pressures that are incentivizing people to stay in the workforce for longer, and that creates bottlenecking. Now, there's also this little thing called AI. Google it. It's a trend that's coming. Don't worry about it. But it's definitely leading to some changes in the workforce, and it will continually create job displacement, which will mean more available time, which will mean more people playing games, which means more people making them. So this industry, I do think, is going to continue to grow incredibly rapidly. And I think that the need for great new people will come back very soon. It just maybe isn't there right now.
Also, Mia says that my husband and I gave her really great feedback. Mia, great. I'm glad that your experience was wonderful. Honestly, use Amir's resources. Schedule those calls. Thank you, Mia. So wonderful. Thank you, Mia.
Well, we also have some nice feedback here. Donna, if you're open to adoptions, it appears that a random LinkedIn user would like you to raise them. So there we go. Some other highlight reel people know about some secret Amana. Woot, woot. And, Jordan says condolences on Gen X. I don't know what that means, but
it means I'm old.
Oh no. We're just gonna focus on the big, happy, smiley, sweaty face here from Jordan instead. And that takes us to time. Boy, we're gonna end with a Mia with a big old moi and a big heart. Any closing thoughts? Let's go maybe Christina and then Donna for parting thoughts.
Yeah, I think ultimately, the biggest takeaway for me is you have a lot more power in your interview than I think people make it out to be. You control the narrative, you control what you're saying, and you do have a little bit of control if you do make a mistake. And just know at the end of the day, you're also interviewing them, right? So making sure that the interview questions they're asking you are applicable with your core values and what you want out of a studio, ultimately. And if you fail the interview, use it as practice and go forward.
Yeah. And also keep in mind, everybody you meet on the journey through a company is there for a reason. At one of the companies that I worked for, and it was a television station, that literally the CEO of the company would not let anybody be hired until he walked down and talked to the receptionist about how that person behaved in the interview. And we saw some weird behavior sometimes. Like, we had this one chick come in and she pulled out her phone and she picked a fight with her boyfriend while she was waiting in the lobby. Not even he called her and threw her off. She picked up the phone and she started it. It's all like, that's not a great impression. And same is true with dealing with recruiters and all the rest. I have a lot of people ask me, they get upset with recruiters because they do the interview, they know their resume is being passed forward, and then they never hear anything. And then they get this real sour taste in their mouth and they're like, recruiters are pointless. I don't want to deal with recruiters. And they start treating them like less than people. It's like, no, they're still people and they're still gatekeepers. So yeah, you still got to treat them nice.
My mama used to always say, my mom is full of wisdom. My mama used to always say, your interview starts the second you get out of the car.
Yeah.
Starts the second you get online. Maybe that candidate was just really creatively demonstrating conflict resolution, Donna. Conflict initiation, it's an undiscovered skill. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and giving us all kinds of great questions to play with here and use the force upon. I hope everybody had fun with our puns and our very much Star Wars themed stuff. And if you'd like to see more of this or similar content, please message any of us individually or make comments on this thread here. We'd love to hear your feedback because this is all about you and giving you a better shot at reaching your Force destiny.
I love it. Thank you all so much for coming.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.